This is the CHGO Cubs Podcast. My name is Corey. I am joined, as always, by Dr. Brendan Miller.
Look at that.
As he
Flattering me
sips his
already. The
tea.
offseason started and you're already flattering me.
Yes. And this, I guess, technically Sunday, I should say we are coming to you on Friday. It is October 4th. I was going to say, Brendan, that I guess our last episode was the first of the off season because as we were recording, the Cubs were eliminated and technically the season was over. But this is really our first off season episode.
They were still playing though when we were recording last week, so it was still technically in season.
So this is the first off season episode, and I mean, there's really no other way to start this show given the events that transpired on Thursday evening, Brendan, than to discuss the fact that once again, we will go another year and the franchise to the north, the Milwaukee Brewers, will continue to have 0 World Series championships.
So do you see this right here? Do you see that?
I do. For those listening on your podcast feed, Brendan's pointing to some kind of flag that's behind him. It has 2016 on it. Brendan, could you explain the significance?
Yeah, 2016. And then if you look right above, it says Cubs. And then hold on, you ready for this? Look at my screen. Ready for this? Up, other way. World Series champions on the other side of the flag. I know.
Wow.
Because they won the World
Chicago
Series.
Cubs.
Corey. 2016 World Series
not
champions.
The Milwaukee Brewers.
No.
Pete Alonso with the death blow in the top of the 9th inning off of Devin Williams.
Pete Alonso.
To knock a head start. Yeah. To knock the Milwaukee Brewers out of the playoffs. Yeah. And, it's always one of those things, too. I was joking with our guy, Cody Bellinger, watching that at the end of that game. And just like, we always laugh about that. We joke about it. We'll tweet about it. And I always enjoy, sometimes you'll get to like, well, the Cubs didn't even make the playoffs. And it's like, I know. I don't care. I got my own problems with the Chicago Cubs. We got an hour to talk about that now. But
we do.
I hate you. So I don't care. Yeah, I know the Cubs are out. I don't care. I enjoy watching my enemies lose. I always will. I've said this a million times, Brendan. I am nothing if not a certified hater.
What I've learned tonight is I don't want to play in these wild card series. So my standard is to get that bye.
It's tough. Yeah.
And win over 100 games. I don't want to do this. These
very tough. A 3-game series is very, very difficult.
Very difficult.
And you kind of, you saw it in these wild card series. I think, the Braves obviously kind of just out of gas. I mean, they're so injured and whatever. San Diego, a very good team. But other than a situation like that, it's a real toss up. 3 games, man. Anybody can lose 2 games in a 3-day span. So that is really tough. I do agree with you that, obviously you want to make the playoffs. And in certain years, it's going to be tough. You have teams like the Dodgers or somebody setting the pace of who's going to get those byes, the Phillies, of course. So even if you win the division like the Brewers did, you don't necessarily avoid it, which when it's the Brewers, I think is funny. As a general rule, I don't agree with it, by the way. If you win the division, you should not have to deal with this. That's my stance on the matter. When it's the Brewers or if it were the Cardinals,
then you agree with
it. Very funny. It's very funny. They deserve absolutely the worst in life. So
I agree with it. I'm fine with it. It's not as if Milwaukee
division, man. Like you shouldn't.
Yeah, but
play in a 3-game series.
Sometimes these divisions suck.
Yeah,
that's true. The Central kind of did suck if you look at it.
That's
like
true.
We should be winning and aiming for 95 to 100 games.
Yeah,
if you don't win
that's really the lesson. Is that obviously you want to get in the playoffs, and the most certain way to get in the playoffs is to, as we've discussed now a lot, as Craig Counsell said, get projected to be a 90 or plus win team. And then, the rest of the standings is kind of out of your control. If other teams are better than you, so be it. If other teams aren't, but your ambition shouldn't be to be in this wild card round, because you can put together a very good season, a very solidly built roster and team, and you lose 2 games and now you're sitting at home with the rest of us. I got to say, Brendan, I really enjoyed that photo of the champagne being taken out of the Brewers locker room. If you didn't see it, folks, there was a photo going around on Twitter of the champagne had been getting ready in the Brewers locker room, and there's a photo of it being wheeled away. It's really
Man, you're
delicious.
just hating Milwaukee tonight. You're in a very hateful mood.
I know that some of our listeners, and if you're watching on YouTube, hop in the chat. If you're listening later, obviously, hello on your podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts. We appreciate you. I know some folks aren't going to be here for it. They're going to say the Cubs have their own problems. I'm pissed at them. I don't care if the Brewers, they've owned the division. I feel all of that too. But like I said, I complain about the Cubs all the time. I don't need to do it in that.
Only we can complain about the Cubs. No one else. Someone starts complaining about the Cubs, I have to start defending the Cubs.
Sure.
So we're not within
right.
the community.
Yes.
But
listen, I know the Cubs have
right.
problems,
Right.
and I
but
talk about it.
But you can't tell me that. I can tell people within
and
the
I
community
also
that.
am going to enjoy watching the Brewers get knocked out of the playoffs.
Listen,
again.
I'm the
It's
most
funny.
petty person
I'm not gonna
ever.
lie.
The only people I want happy is me.
Are us.
And you. Yeah. Anyone who's
and our loyal
listeners.
Us, that's it.
Yeah, sometimes it can be a little cruel, but most of them are pretty nice.
Well, you should try being less stupid, I think.
Well, sometimes it's very difficult to.
And last I'll say on this, and then we will talk about the Chicago Cubs. But to bring it Cubs centric, I want to make something very clear.
Cubs related.
I do I do respect the dearly departed Ron Santo so much that I feel it necessary to make this clarification. I have never and will never root for or be happy for the success of the New York Mets. I am simply relishing in the end of the Milwaukee Brewers season. I need that on record. Love you, Ronnie. No one's supporting the Mets. There's no positive Mets talk here. Okay? Just need that to be clear. So let's talk about the Chicago Cubs. When you and I did our episode on Sunday, as the season ended, we talked about the wonderful day on Saturday with Kyle Hendricks. We talked about the offense, kind of gave our general thoughts on the 2024 performance of the offseason or of the offense relative to the projections and what we talked about in the offseason. And then, of course, what we saw during the season. So I think on this episode, at some point, I'd like to talk about the starting pitchers or just the pitching staff, things we saw in 2024, what to be excited for in 2025, anything that went wrong in 2024, like we did with the offense. But I do feel like we should start with some of Jed's thoughts, at least just you and I giving our feeling on it. I don't want to talk about it too much because I'm not a big fan of parsing through his management speak or business speak, because it's not a worthwhile exercise usually. But part of the reason I also don't want to spend the whole hour doing it is our wonderful team, Luke, Cody, and Ryan, have talked about it a lot. They've been talking about it all week. They had an episode right after Jed was done speaking on Tuesday, and I think they've continued to talk about some of his comments throughout the week. So if you're looking for a full extended conversation about Jed Hoyer's presser and some of his comments, I would direct you to the CHGO Sports YouTube feed and some of the episodes that Luke, Cody, and Ryan have done throughout this week. Those are really good discussions. General thoughts. I mean, I know you don't like the way that Jed talks to the media. You're famously about that. I would say my thing is, as I said, he's not going to get up there and fully lay his cards out on the table, as much as we'd love to hear it, right? As a fan base, you really would love to hear him get up there and maybe even toss out some expletives like, this is completely unacceptable. I'm done missing the playoffs. Big stuff is coming. Like, the Chicago Cubs are back. But even if that was what he was going to do and how he felt, he's not going to sit in front of a microphone and say that. He's not going to tell Juan Soto's agent, checkbook's open, baby, like, here come the Cubs. That's not a good decision on his part. That being said, my initial thing was listening to it. I absolutely understand why all of the comments on the social media posts and everything were, Jed is a clown. He's got to go. I can't listen to this stuff anymore. Yeah. When I understood it, right? Like, I understood why everybody was so upset. I don't know if everyone was upset, but there was a lot
perturbed.
of anger and kind of like, as I said, eye rolling with the way that he decided to go about discussing some of those things.
It was my favorite Jed Hoyer press conference. I'm being
Wow.
dead serious. The reason being, give me one quote from that press conference. One quote. You can't. It was not a quote worthy press conference. Over the
So he
years,
didn't give us the offense is broken. That's
yes,
what you're saying.
the
Yeah.
offense is broken. Good teams blow teams out.
Yeah.
Intelligent spending.
Yeah.
I want a dull press conference. That's what he delivered. He did recognize our fans deserve playoff series, yada, yada, yada. Don't tell me what I want to hear. Go and actually do it.
Yeah.
Leave it very vanilla and don't leave anything up for misinterpretation, because what ends up happening is those words become narratives.
Yes.
And then we
100%.
have to talk about those narratives, and it's kind of annoying. So this presser is forgetful. As a result, it's my most memorable. I loved it.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of what I meant when I said, you don't want to lay your cards on the table. We've had examples in the past where they kind of do. The famous one that I'm referencing being Theo's after 2018, the offense broke, and sort of what you're saying about the narratives that it creates is that whatever happened behind the scenes, whether presumably it was ownership that was not greenlighting the Bryce Harper contract or whatever it is, that then leads to everybody going, okay, you said the offense broke, but you
what did you
didn't do
do?
anything to make it better.
And on that note, just before Rizzo reached free agency, Jed Hoyer said, quote, I'm very confident we're going to
Stuff like
re-sign
that.
Anthony
Yeah.
Rizzo. And
So
that stuff just, it brings about the worst out of all of us.
yes,
Naturally so.
and look, part of it too, when you let's keep using Juan Soto as the example because he's the big fish once again. If he says something even akin to "we are going after the biggest fish, we are going to make a huge splash," what if Juan Soto just doesn't want to play here? Like then it just sets you up for, well, you've set this expectation that now you have to deliver. So I understand it in that regard. I guess what I meant in terms of understanding people's frustration is that and again, there's a lot of nuance to this. I understand why he says this stuff, but continuing to hear talk like we want sustained success. We don't want to sacrifice, a future success or sustained success for just one season or one move or things like that. I'm just getting tired of hearing that stuff, Brendan, because the immediate reaction that I think most of us have is that's a wonderful thought. I love the idea of sustained success. When is year one of that success coming, though? Like sustained success sounds great. We haven't had any of it, though. So can we prioritize any level of success before we're worrying about sustaining it? Like it sounds great. Yes, I'd love to be a playoff team perennially and make the World Series every other year, or like the Astros run that just ended, making the championship series every year for, nearly over half a decade. But we haven't had any of the success. So continuing to hear we're focused on building something and sustaining something. It's like that is great. Like, could we get the beginning of that though at any point, or are we just going to keep talking about that? That's the only thing. But again, parsing through business speak and cliches and all this stuff, like I don't think it's worth losing any sleep over. But again, I do understand, like, look, you haven't made the playoffs in a while. You missed out again. You have a heavy payroll and you're watching teams like the Royals and the Tigers and stuff make it through the playoffs and turn their rebuilds into something and stuff like that. I understand why people don't want to hear more of these kind of platitudes and the talking of, well, only a few of the 5-win players were projected to be and stuff. And most people are watching that going, get good players, Jed, please stop with this like legalese of how to get around this stuff.
That's what I don't like about Jed. I feel like he doesn't communicate his point effectively. Before I do the ad break here, we can point back to when the core was traded and he went on the radio the next day saying, well, they said they wanted to be Cubs, but everything during negotiations hinted at them not wanting to be a Cub. to which he had to apologize the very next day because it angered Anthony Rizzo, which he responded to. So Jed, sometimes surprisingly for being such a high-ranking executive, doesn't communicate himself effectively. Even with that 5 WAR comment, I know what he's trying to say.
Of course, yeah.
Most players who reach 5 WAR, they're not projected as such. He's absolutely right. But what he fails to communicate is he understands fans wanting those 5-win players and the need sometimes from the fan speaking to pay for that. As long as
Well,
you acknowledge
and
those, it's
feeling,
okay.
yeah, and feeling like the Chicago Cubs of
Yeah.
most organizations should not only
Like,
be looking for that cheaply and
yeah.
internally
Like,
all the time. Of course you want,
like you can acknowledge this.
yes,
And that's what made
100%.
Theo so good because
Yeah.
when he was talking, it almost felt as if fans were heard because Theo's a great communicator. He's a great wordsmith. He wanted to be a
Yeah.
storyteller. He understands those perspectives.
Yeah. All right. We should hit our first ad break here. We'll talk a little bit more about it, but I did just want to offer our thoughts on that. But let us take a quick ad break here. We'll be back momentarily.
With Empire today, you get shop at home convenience, the right product for your needs, quick and professional installation, and a low price guarantee. Jed Hoyer's favorite. Empire today is the best place to get new flooring, so of course they have copycats, but Empire cannot be beaten on quality, service, and speed. So competitors advertise low quality products that Empire simply will not carry. Empire won't promise the lowest prices because anyone who does is putting flooring in your home they would not put in theirs. Shopping for floors at a big box store can be frustrating. You might talk to someone today who was working in plumbing yesterday. Flooring, though, is all Empire does. They live and breathe flooring, so you can be confident you're getting honest, upfront advice. They also service their own warranty, so if an issue does arise, you can just call Empire. They service all warranties themselves. You won't have to track down a manufacturer's phone number. Schedule a free in-home estimate today. All listeners can receive a $350 off discount when they use the promo code CHGO. Restrictions do apply. See empiretoday.com/CHGO for details. Some beers can say they're brewed for baseball. Only Blue Moon is brewed by baseball. Beer and baseball just go good together, and no beer goes better than the one that was literally born in a ballpark. From its refreshing flavor with Valencia orange peel for a subtle sweetness and hints of coriander, Blue Moon Belgian-style wheat ale is a one-of-a-kind beer that is made brighter. Why strike out with the same old beer when you can get something one-of-a-kind? Get this throughout the offseason. Remember the nostalgia of the baseball season every time you crack open a Blue Moon. You can bring the ballpark to you with Blue Moon Belgian-style wheat ale. It's one of a kind every time. Get Blue Moon delivered by visiting get.bluemoonbeer.com/CHGO to see your delivery options. That's get.bluemoonbeer.com/CHGO. Blue Moon, made brighter. Celebrate responsibly. Blue Moon Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado.
All right, Brendan. One thing I did want to mention too, as you know, our main crew won't be on until next week, is that it looks like we have some manager news in the National League Central Division.
Did they fire Craig Counsell?
No. No, they did not. It sounds like reports from Cincinnati and Cleveland are that one Terry Francona is going to take the Reds job. So Terry Francona in the division. We were talking about
Cleveland in 2016.
Yeah, so we were talking about that in the CHGO Cubs Slack channel, and our guy Pat Norton mentioned that, you know, maybe it wasn't, you know, historically a bad thing for the Cubs to go up against Terry Francona. And I said, you know, Pat, what are you referring to?
Yeah.
And like you pointed out with the flag behind you, he said that when the Cubs won the World Series in 2016, they beat Terry Francona when he was in Cleveland. So bits, very funny bits that everybody loves aside, and that never get old. Say again?
I got so excited my mic unplugged. How many times do you think we've done that bit?
A lot. I will say, as I'm talking, your mic sounds a little off, if it's possible for you to check that. But Terry Francona is a great manager. He has a great
We're back.
reputation. Obviously, how the Reds front office decides to act historically, they're not, the most active there, but he's a great manager. He's a great manager. He cultivates a great clubhouse. He has an unbelievable reputation in this league, obviously a lot of success in this league. So it's not specifically what you want. But yeah, unfortunately for Terry, it's more about how the Reds organization is going to act and, be putting teams together. But they've, not been a awful team the
Dumpster
last
fire.
couple of years. A lot of talent on that team. So yeah, it's an NL Central team that's adding an asset. But a lot of people, especially in our YouTube chat, will tell you that a manager doesn't mean anything. So,
well, David Ross 183 and so did Craig Council. Corey.
right.
So they're right.
Yes.
Right.
So David Ross remains on the hunt for a managing job. So a lot of people thought that might be a landing spot for him. I think he made his debut.
By the way, he got a hair
Reds,
transplant.
his career. I did see that. Yeah.
It looks pretty good. I like it.
That. Yeah. All right. So yeah, back to our own mess. And yeah, I think just finishing up on the Jed Hoyer thing, like I said, I understand that there were points in there that people get kind of frustrated with, or they kind of roll their eyes at, or they're kind of sick of. I get it. And it would be nice to hear him just go up there and kind of, put all the chips on the table and just tell us all what we want to hear, which is this isn't good enough. Juggernaut Cubs are back. Like whatever I have to do, we're winning 110 games. Like, like a political rally where like, Ryan and Jared are in the media pen. They're cheering. Everybody's it's the, a raucous, but it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And I get annoyed listening to some of this stuff just the same as everybody else. But to me, and my conclusion is it's all action, man. It does not matter what he says. If he sits there and promises big stuff, he still has to deliver it. If he sits there and promises nothing, he can still deliver something really big. And so we just have to sit and wait. I understand why it's frustrating for people, though. I was equally frustrated, but I guess I just try to understand from a business perspective. He's just not going to sit there and tell us exactly what we want to hear.
Good. Let's move on. I'm sick of talking about these press conferences. If I have to talk
That's
about
all we
another
got.
press conference,
That's the thing.
I mean, for the past 8 years, it's been press conference, trying to look between the lines. They don't care about the press conferences, as they should not. If you're worried about the press conference as an executive, something's wrong with you. You should wake up that morning, have a nice bagel and cream cheese, a cup of coffee, and figure out what you're going to say 10 minutes before you go on those podiums.
Yeah, I do. Like I said, I do just understand when his answer to, do you think the Cubs need a real star player? Is this like dissertation worth, like, kind of, let me wiggle my way around answering that question?
You should get some coaching from Theo Epstein.
It's like, again, if he says yes, it sets the expectation that they don't have one and that he needs to go get one. So he's not going to say it. But I understand why people are like, oh, like, dude, enough with the like, well, we believe, just say yes.
All right.
The Chicago Cubs should have star players.
I'm sick of talking about this.
All right. The one thing I did as we move toward the offseason, I think one of the big things, and he did talk about this in his press conference, the Cody Bellinger decision is a particularly big one. And you and I talked about the offense in the last episode, but I don't think we talked like either what you and I think he might do. And really, moreover than that, like, it's a pretty consequential decision for this team. For a number of reasons. Obviously, the money. If they have to commit the money, then that's money that can't be spent elsewhere. But also just positionally, things get very kind of interesting, as you saw throughout this season. But with Happ, Seiya, PCA, obviously going to start the season as your center fielder. Michael Busch played really well at first base. It's crowded. So if he decides to come back, as we talked about, the avenues to improve this team or add new players or whatever it might be does get a little murky. So in his press conference, he sort of loosely kind of suggested he expected Cody to have some options out there. Do you have a feeling one way or another on what you're expecting?
Not really. There's not much precedence other than the recent Boris clients taking these shorter deals, including Matt Chapman, who just got
Yeah.
extended for, I believe, an extra 6 years to 160 million, somewhere around there. Of course, we can point back to Carlos Correa, who signed a similar 3-year, $100 million deal before the whole broken leg fiasco of last offseason. There's not much precedence. If I had to bet, I probably would bet on him opting out. I think the baseline of him getting close to 28, even for a 1-year deal, is pretty high in probability in the free agent market. The qualifying offer will be around 22 million. He's going to be due 28 million. If he goes to the market at his age, I think at the bare minimum, he can still even get a 2-year, $56 million contract. So I think it's probably likely
Yeah.
he opts out. The caveat is there's all this regional sports network drama.
Right.
There's
Except for the Braves.
uncertainty.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's uncertainty and how teams can forecast revenue. So because of that, these markets can be unpredictable at times, but I still think he opts out. That's my hunch.
Crane Kenny masterclass once again.
He described it as a bloodbath, which kind of, got me a little concerned because if, he's describing it as such, well, I'm worried about him cutting back
Well,
money.
I mean, at least for now, this is a Bally's thing, right? Those teams, and they're not renewing, I think, everybody except the Atlanta Braves.
Listen, first off, Corey and I are not into the whole TV regional sports network
No.
fiasco. There is stuff with Comcast, I believe. There's a deal ending. If you're interested in it, go read Ryan's work, Jared's work, and look it up. But there is some nuance and some problems in how it
Yeah.
could affect the Cubs. The details, though, are just
I
unknown to us.
I think our good old friend Evan Altman was always like an expert in that stuff, if I
He was
remember correctly.
obsessed with it.
Yeah. And also, just so it's clear, I was joking about the Crane thing.
Oh, were you? I thought you were a
Yeah.
big Crane guy.
Yeah, no.
Thanks for clarifying.
I wouldn't be surprised either way, I think. But I
Do you
tend.
think Jed wants him to opt out? No, that's a better question.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I think
I
you
think
just,
so
if
too.
I were in his position, you'd want the flexibility, because if he
Yeah.
opts out, you could still technically re-sign him if you wanted him that badly.
It's akin to the whole Shota Stroman situation.
Yeah, like,
Stroman opts
yeah. And I
out,
mean,
money
some
goes to
people,
Shota.
it's like, I think the fact that he's 29 and can play center field as well as he can, that's the real kicker here. It's like if we were talking about a guy who has no mobility, he has to play first base or something, or DH, and he just put up a, what was it, 110, 113 WRC plus on the season, then it's a lot murkier because you can see how maybe the deals aren't going to be there for him. But a 29-year-old center fielder who's always been a really good defender. I know his metrics weren't great this year, but again, he was playing different positions. He was dealing with injuries, etc. All even a down year for him. That's now a couple years in a row of being a solid above league average hitter. I would guess that as a 29-year-old, you might try to get yourself some security, get a multi-year deal, lock it down, figure out where you are going to live and all of that, which he doesn't have right now in Chicago. And if you wait too long, then you're 30, then you're 31, and, maybe it's not as easy to do that. But I don't know. The guaranteed money's nice. And you don't have to change anything.
Some guys though push for the ceiling. Rizzo was one of those
Yeah,
guys. Cheaper
yeah,
arbitration extension with the Cubs, his free agency, and he
yeah.
himself said, "I want to maximize how much money I make, so I take these shorter deals." So guys
And I mean,
do
look,
that.
I'll be honest with you. I've quite enjoyed Cody Bellinger's time as a Cub. I personally am hoping that he opts out. I think I would rather have the flexibility, especially when you look at just where things are positionally for the Cubs. I don't think it's bad if he comes back, but he just didn't have an explosive season last year. And that's what this lineup is missing. And I don't know what budget we're working with. And so at this point, I always kind of assume that it's going to be right around that first tier of the luxury tax, maybe just below, similar to the way we've seen, or now that they're
Or just
over,
like
maybe a
3
little
million,
over.
3 million
Yeah.
over, just like they wanted.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'd rather they have the money. I'd rather they have the money. And, Jed knows the deficiencies of the team last year, use the money to hopefully try and fix some of those holes. But I don't think it's the end of the world if he comes back. It just does. If Cody does opt in, I think it pushes a lot of the conversations for, okay, do they have to trade somebody? Like, do you have to make a pretty explicit decision about who's playing first base every day? Is Seiya DHing all the time so that outfield spot opens up? It does kind of force your hand from a roster building perspective of like, okay, we have to make some decisions here because there's a good handful of everyday players that need to play 140 plus games and not enough positions for all of them on the field.
Yep. All right.
So
Let's take our second ad break here. Come back around. We'll finish up on some pitching, perhaps. Get ready for the off season ahead. With quality shades built to last, our friends at Shady Rays have you covered with premium polarized shades that will not break the bank. They have hundreds of options to choose from, so you're bound to find the perfect pair to match your style. Plus, if your shades ever go missing or take an unexpected hit, don't sweat it. They have the most insane protection in all of eyewear. Every pair is backed by lost or broken replacements. And if you don't love your shades, exchange them for a new pair or return worry-free within 30 days. There's no risk. When you shop, their team always has your back with personal and fast support. Exclusively for listeners, Shady Rays is giving out their best deal of the season. Head to shadyrays.com. Use code CHGO for 35% off polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself. The shades are rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. So it is the Cubs off season, but Bears are kicking up. They're 2-2. Caleb Williams, fight on. Had a great game. Yeah, don't give me that. Do you know how many times you've been talking about Michigan for the past 3 years?
they
I
won
say
a
it one
national
time. I say
championship,
it
Brendan.
one time. The starting Chicago Bears quarterback is a USC Trojan. I'm allowed to say it one time. And everyone's probably wondering what the hell I'm
You
talking
don't have
about.
a jersey. Braggs does.
I have a lot of other
Yeah, think about that.
connections with USC, Corey. If you can't make the trip to London to see Caleb and the Bears, you can join the CHGO crew in Phoenix to see the Bears go head-to-head with the Arizona Cardinals on November 3rd. Our trip package includes a 3-night stay at a 4-star Phoenix hotel. And just to be clear, I grew up in Arizona half my life after Chicago. Phoenix is awesome. If you can make it out to early November, I cannot recommend a better time. We're talking 60s, high 60s, low 70s. Phoenix has amazing resorts. When I was in college, I used to go sneak into like the Marriott and all those top end resorts all the time. Love Arizona. There also will be a Q&A with Bears alumni, all-inclusive tailgate party or round trip transportation to the game, upper level game tickets to the Bears versus Cardinals. So reserve your spot at the party. Go to truefantravel.com right now. Limited spots are available, and I guess they do sell out pretty fast. Their last meetup, I think, got like hundreds of tickets, and it was very difficult to get. So if you're interested, especially if you want to get out of the cold Chicago weather, I definitely recommend going to Arizona.
And I will add on, if you are local in Chicago, obviously the CHGO tailgates for the Bears games have been going on already this season. Have another one coming up on Sunday, October 6th. So if you can't make it to London or Arizona, stay local. Best tailgates in the city.
So that's
food,
this Sunday.
drinks. You may get an occasional Luke Stuckmeyer appearance. They're not all the time. He's got to keep it exclusive, but you can chase it. You can chase having that early morning beer with Luke Stuckmeyer before the
Corey
Chicago Bears
Friedman,
game.
Experience.
Probably when they play an afternoon game. It's a little early for you, boy. And also, just want to shout out, obviously, the CHGO Bears team does great work, pregame, postgame, Cole Kmet, Lance Briggs, Alex Brown. But also it's October. That means it's hockey season. It's going to be basketball season. CHGO Blackhawks crew is excellent at what they do. CHGO Bulls crew, excellent at what they do. So if you are a fan of other teams looking for a similar community to ours, similar analysis, great writing, check out those teams. Check out allchgo.com and subscribe to the CHGO Sports
I saw
YouTube
Will
page.
got a G League tryout.
I did see that. Yeah.
And he looked really good.
Yeah.
But I will be honest. My first reaction was,
You
well,
want
how
to
come
try
I
out for
haven't
the
been?
Cubs.
Yeah, how come I haven't been invited to try for the Cubs? I even go to Mesa during the offseason. I'm right by the field.
I don't know, Brendan. I don't think they want you on the field, is my feeling.
I have phenomenal footwork.
Yeah. I think you
Phenomenal
might be
footwork.
able to put out like a tryout to be like the guy that sets up the track man for Tommy Hotovy. I feel like
I'm
that
down with
is a
that.
nice
I'm down with that.
relationship that could work.
I
Yeah.
don't know if I ever told us on there. I applied to be their smoothie maker in college during spring training
Okay.
when I was 18. I did not even get an interview.
Yeah.
Like they actually emailed me back saying, "Hey, sorry, we're not interested." So I emailed
Well,
them back saying, "Just keep me in future thoughts for next season." Never happened.
such is life, my friend.
Yeah.
I wanted to be Theo Epstein at one point. I wanted to be the guy giving those answers that piss everybody off at these press conferences,
So you were
and
talking to me at
they
10:30
get
at
it.
night.
Yeah, and here we are. But I want to finish. I think we can finish talking a little pitching and just kind of looking back a little bit at the 2024 season, but really just sort
Yeah.
of setting up for this off season. And it's always good, I think, to have these conversations, especially as you watch the playoffs, because it does always remind you of the difference in roster building and success in the 162 game regular season versus the playoffs. And you watch a game like that Orioles series, I thought was pretty fascinating, Brendan. Just in the sense that was such a vaunted offense, and they just got absolutely shut down in that series by the Kansas City Royals. And Corbin Burns in that his last outing, unbelievable. But the one run enough to shut it down. And so when we look at this Cubs rotation, I thought, the pitching staff as a whole, outside of the disaster that was the early season bullpen, and it was nothing short of a disaster. I think most of us would argue it might be the single biggest reason that team doesn't end up making the playoffs. Starting pitching, I thought really great, and a lot to really look forward to going into next year. So I think the question I'll pose to you is, when you look at this pitching staff, do you look at that starting and the bullpen as a whole? Do you look at that as something? I feel like when we talk about the offense, we talk as though there is a big missing piece, and it needs more slug, it needs more power, and there is a big missing piece. Do you feel that way about the pitching staff? Do you feel that they have what they need internally? Do they need to go and get another top of the rotation arm? I feel like, too, again, watching the playoffs, you watch Josh Hader blow a game and blow a series and have one of the worst years of his career, even though I think relatively, it was good, but not at his standard. Like, that was a big contract. Some people wanted the Cubs to maybe do that, being uncertain of the closer situation, but that doesn't, sometimes that blows up in your face too. How do you feel about this pitching staff?
It needs support. There's a foundation there. Shota, Steele, Tyone all had great years, but it needs support. If you want to be picky, Justin Steele has been every bit what we had hoped he would be going into the year. But injuries, multiple injuries, didn't allow him to get to 170 innings. In fact, he's never been above 175 his entire career. He's entering close to 30 years old at the back end of his 20s. The question I have is, well, can he, when the playoffs come around, have the stamina in place to withstand an extra month? And the question is fair. The answer is, we don't know. I don't like we don't know answers. I like known answers as best as we can possibly get. But that being said, Steele did have 3 wins above replacement, 134 innings. Next in line was Shota, 173 innings, a 3 WAR as well, with a 2.9 ERA. Shota, even getting to 173 and having the success he did, exceeded baseball projections, exceeded my expectations and probably yours too. Taillon had a fantastic year. 2.3 WAR, 3.3 ERA, a FIP under 4. He outperformed his projections and outperformed a lot of fans' negative expectations. After that, it was hit or miss. The bullpen was awful in May, June, and July. The AAA development this year was also not good. In the thing I can't reconcile with this pitching infrastructure is how they can at times get folks outside the organization and immediately change their careers on a dime. You look at even the back end of their bullpen with Pearson. He became a reliable pitcher towards the back end. Maybe he starts next year. You look at someone like Jorge Lopez, became one of the most valuable relievers in the second half. It doesn't make sense. In AAA, there are guys percolating through the system outside of Porter Hodge. The walk rates are like insane. Cam Sanders had a 11 walk per 9 in AAA last year. Michael Arias, a 9 walk per 9. Riley Martin, almost 7. Edwin Escobar, that lefty from Japan, that was the first signing last offseason, almost a 7 walk per 9.
It's like the
shocking to
2018
see these
Cubs.
numbers. What's that?
It's like the 2018 Cubs.
It really is. And then like Frankie Scalzo. Love Frankie Scalzo. He was someone in AA who had a 2 walk per 9. I'm thinking, well, pretty good command. Haven't seen him pitch, but the stats look good. Gets called up to AAA, and in his few innings, in 28 innings, walk per 9 went up to 5. So the question I have is, why are the walks so damn high in AAA? And then separately, why, when Porter Hodge gets called up from AAA to the big leagues, he cuts his walk rate in half? That doesn't make sense to me. So the natural question that comes to mind is the AAA pitching development optimized? Is the coaching optimized? Is the scouting optimized from those amateur signings or back end of the draft, even though Cantripus has been awesome? Why are the walks so damn high across these levels? And if that's the case, then I'm worried that another May, June, July can plague the Cubs next year, because the reality is you can't buy your bullpen. As much as you want to do it, you cannot buy your bullpen. Hector Neris, $9 million DFA'd right before the last 4 weeks of the season. So this has to be addressed somehow, whether it's through firing their strength and conditioning coaches, which they did, by the way. Kind of like that. No offense to the strength and conditioning guys, but it's good to see, because a lot of injuries did happen. But something needs to change at those levels so we can support if a bullpen does break, as it did in 2024.
Do you think, are you going to miss Mike Napoli?
He's a first base coach. Seems like a lovely guy. I like the energy, like the glasses, like the beard. Players loved him. It reminds me of 2016 when the Cubs won the World Series, by the way. But this, to your point, is probably going to reflect truly what Correct Counsel wants, because now he has entire offseason.
It's not a surprise. I mean, he didn't
pick
get
his
to choose most of his staff. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, not being sure how much money they're going to have to play with, but I would be pretty down with them going for another top of the rotation guy. Corbin Burns is available.
Would you say they need it?
Well, here's the thing that I sort of started to think about. I mean, obviously, you have like an injury to Cade Horton that kind of, mucks up that timeline a little bit. Ben Brown dealt with an injury, still, I think, dealing with an injury. Jordan Wicks got delayed and stuff like that. So
Hendricks is gone.
Yeah, my feeling on, I don't know if they need a top of the rotation guy. I just think that if we're unsure about how serious their pursuit of a legitimate star bat might be, shoring up the pitching staff and making sure that you have a staff that can succeed in October is a very worthwhile strategy of winning baseball games. But to your point of, do they need one? They definitely need more depth in the rotation, because as we just looked at, you have all those injuries. Then you have guys, someone like Hayden Wesneski, who doesn't take that kind of jump that you were hoping he was going to take, doesn't like solidify himself as a member of the rotation. You have guys like Javier Assad, who worked their tail off for you this season and did excellent work. Not at all comparable to Hayden Wesneski, but in terms of, if you were going into next year, what are you projecting?
They need a top rotation starter.
Caveat, yeah.
Corey, they need a top rotation starter. Come on,
Fine.
not like
I'm for it.
They've been great. Don't get me wrong, but Shota with his WAR still 29th in baseball. Again, we can point back to the golden era, 2016. They had 3 of their guys in Cy Young contention. Of course, that's going to make a difference, but we need guys beyond 3 WAR, as good as Shota is.
Sure.
We need sluggers, 4 and 5 hitters. We need ace-like pitchers. We need ace-like stuff.
Just a couple things.
Just a couple things.
Just a couple things, and the Cubs are right there. Easy.
Oh, but you know what I mean, though? Like,
no, I do. I do. I kind of like Jed Hoyer. I was kind of.
You were. Well, that's why you had that front office
around the answer. But I was just trying to highlight that I think the importance of it so much is that you need these guys to be able to last. And like, for as great as Justin Steele has been, he hasn't been able to get through a complete and full 162 game season. Yeah. And it's hard to do. When you don't put the strain on your arm, it's hard to then go out and do it. And that's why, that's why, like, our guy Ryan Herrera was adamant that when he was healthy, even though the season was over, he come back and pitch. Just get those innings, get the more experience on your arm. Tyone was great. Steele was great. Shota was great. But you need it all to last deep, potentially into October. And when you look at how things played out last year, for as good as a lot of those guys are, and for as strong as I feel about that group and the depth potential that it has, if guys can get healthy, if Jordan Wicks is healthy going into next year, which it appears he will be, if Ben Brown can be healthy by the time it rolls around, you feel really good about the depth. But you need those top guys that can take you pole to pole. And there's a reason that, like, the gentleman, I'm never good at this. This guy,
I can't do it either.
Over my left shoulder. If you're listening on podcast, if you haven't watched us ever on YouTube, I have a John Lester jersey in the background of every episode, obviously. But there's a reason he had the reputation that he did. He was going to give you 30 plus starts, 180 plus innings. He was going to be there in April. He was going to be there if you made it to the World Series. In the Cubs case, like, pitching in the last game, even though he didn't start it, right? Coming into a dirty inning, just like Joe Madden promised. But you need.
They win that game, by the way?
They did. Okay, that's like 6 times in this episode. People are definitely, like, sick of us by now.
Sorry.
But yeah, so that's why, like, go get Corbin Burns, go get Max Fried. Like, guys
that's like Dansby's best friend, by the way.
Sure, fine, works for me. Like, get these guys at the top of the rotation, and that's not a way to suggest that, like, the star power on offense and all of that is unimportant. It's horribly important. You can have a great starting staff, and you still might end up, as we saw a lot early in this year when the Cubs rotation was on fire to start the season, and you had so many guys performing out of their minds. Like, they still lost a bunch of 2-1, 3-2, 1-0 type games, because you got to be able to score runs. So, of course, it's still important. But I think if they were able to get another guy to fit at the top of this rotation, you'd very strongly be looking at this group as potentially one of the best in the league. And you'd feel very confident in that going into the year. And you take a little bit of that burden off of those top guys. Like, so much of the beginning of the 2024 season was, oh, well, Shota's got a sub-1 ERA, and yeah, we can't score any runs, but, they'll take care of it. As long as they're perfect, we can win this game. And then the offense can't score. You're blowing games. If you have more of that top level talent, it doesn't become something where then when Shota has one bad game, it's the end of the world because, well, he's the guy we can trust who's not going to. I'm for it. I'm definitely for it. And as I said, you need that depth. You need to be able to get through 162 games and get into the playoffs with those guys healthy in rotation. The Dodgers are a great kind of example of this. And they added Flaherty to kind of give them some balance. And I think I read that Yamamoto is coming back, but he's dealt with injuries. Like Walker Buehler's dealt with injuries. Kershaw's dealt with injuries. Ton of injuries.
Bobby Miller.
And then you get
May.
to a point, like where you have to win playoff series and nobody's left. And you're trying to figure out like, all right, well, who can start these games? And that's not the position you want to be in. You need to build a group that you can lean on that depth and lean on your stars, but that when you get to October, just like the Cubs did in 2016, Brendan, like you need those guys healthy and ready to go out there and grind it through October, because that's how a lot of these teams win. You think about like the Nationals, the year they won the World Series. I mean, that was the Strasburg, like Patrick Corbin show and Max Scherzer night in, night out. And they were just going to live and die with those guys. And that's kind of the position that you need to find yourself in.
It will be fascinating what Corbin Burnes draws from the market, the recent injury history.
Yeah.
But despite that, 194 innings in 2024, 193 in 2023, 202 in 2022. So even though there's been, hints of injuries here and there, he's been pretty durable. We'll see what he gets. I mean, the ERA numbers are just like absurd too. ERA is under 3 each year. You're into
Jameson
it.
Tyone is your 4, and then you're able to use that 5 spot to kind of say, hey, like Javier Assad, Jordan Wicks, Ben Brown, whoever, kind of wants to have this. Then you have long really. I mean, it gives you so much depth and flexibility for Counsell and Hottovy to work with. Yeah, I'm into it.
It just depends on how the pieces to the puzzle fit, right? If it's going to restrict their ability to go out and sign a bat, then I do think you have to question if it makes sense to get that ace level guy now or wait to the deadline to see how, to your point, some of these pitchers do shape up health-wise. Ben Brown, Jordan Wicks, Cade Horton, because maybe that money, like we saw with Bellinger this year, could be spent in better fashion in the form of like a hitter, for example. So that might be what they end up doing. If it were me, without thinking about it now, I do feel as if going into the year, having a stable foundation of pitching innings projected allows so much flexibility to even ease in some of these younger pitchers.
What helps the
that
bullpen.
would be my.
That's the thing too. Everybody, you have to make the bullpen better. And to your point, like you don't want to throw a ton of money at that. It's very risky. It often does not work. It helps the bullpen. If you push everybody down and you're not relying on all these guys to eat so many starts, it helps. Like those guys would be Javier Assad would be an excellent guy to have out of your bullpen. And then it makes everybody else's job a little bit easier.
Then swinging with Hayden Wisniewski from the rotation to the bullpen, and the injury that let him off for the rest of the year, Ben Brown's neck and everything. It's like, we like these roles, these versatile roles like Michael King was in with New York prior to coming over to San Diego. But there comes a time, as I feel as if every time does, where you have to make a decision on what the role is. I don't think, as I start watching the sport more and seeing how modern pitching is changing, I'm starting to believe that the swinging back and forth is just wasted opportunities. It's wasted volume of your best role. So maybe that's how the Cubs change their infrastructure going forward. They commit to certain roles for these guys and they stick to it this time.
Okay, so last 5 minutes here. And I will say, when I say like you don't want to throw money at the bullpen, it doesn't mean that I don't think they should spend any money to add arms to it or anything. But it's just like, you see with a contract like Hader's, or even like Edwin Diaz has had moments of being really great for the Mets, but he's also been hurt. He's also struggled at times. Like these things are so hit or miss, but to get those like top tier relievers, it is a lot of money and a lot of years that you usually have to commit to that. And it is a very, very risky thing. And when we're talking about when we're complaining about their financial flexibility and how they use their money, that is the easiest way for like these things to get clogged up. I think if you were looking at this, let's say Cody Bellinger opts in, let's start there. So just so that I can limit the money a little bit. If you have the funds to make one splash, are you spending it on a top of the rotation arm, Corbin Burns, Max Fried, or are you making the effort? Again, I'm not entertaining the Juan Soto thing, but like trading for Vlad Guerrero or something like that and absorbing that contract or moving the assets, whatever. If you can make one big move, what are you doing? Which area are you improving?
I would probably improve the pitching. I think the pitching is the most unpredictable one. I think as much as we talk about the hitting needing to improve, which it does, the pitching always will be the most volatile aspect of your organization. So if I only have one, of course, I would go with the pitching. That being said, and we're going to get into it throughout the offseason, I am very interested in how they maneuver if Bellinger does opt in, Michael Busch. I think there's a real argument to be had that this is the time to trade Michael Busch. Nothing against Michael Busch's fantastic season, but it's similar to some respect, although the money's different because they locked up Starlin Castro at the time. But Castro's profile in 2015 was one of some volatility because of that contact and that hit or miss power profile. I look at Michael Busch, and it's not apples to apples, but the power contact profile inspires a lack of confident projection. So if there's a way to lock in a first baseman and trade Michael Busch to shore up the starting rotation, like you just pointed to, maybe through free agency, that actually might be my preferred method. And I might be more willing to trade Busch in return for one of those starting pitching pieces and sign Pete Alonso. Pete Alonso with a good contact rates, 35 plus home runs, et cetera, et cetera. So that might be one,
Well, so now that was one,
theoretical.
and I mean, I know Cody's talked about this, but his numbers were pretty similar to Michael Busch. Obviously, Pete has a bigger track record, of course.
So Pete Alonso had a 340 weight on base average. This is a good point because we talk about the analogy last week we brought up was bowlers and repeating their mechanics. If you repeat Michael Busch's 2024 and Pete Alonso's 2024 over the course of 10 seasons, it is highly probable that Pete Alonso ends up hitting 35 plus home runs and having a substantially higher overall run production. I like Busch. They were comparable, but Pete Alonso's profile is more projectable. And at the projected cost, we'll see, doesn't appear to be quite high, although the market hasn't established itself. It does make sense in my mind, at least to explore it.
All right. Last couple minutes here. I'm going to answer the offense just to give the other answer. I'm tired of they had their periods of, obviously scoring runs and stuff like that, but I want to watch them put up crooked numbers, man. I'm tired of watching months at a time, feeling like if the other team scores 2 runs, the game is over.
Yeah.
I'm tired of it. I want them to have a juggernaut offense. Like I'm tired of of the way that they've kind of played baseball a little bit the last couple of years. The last question I want to ask for you, looking at MLB trade rumors, they put out some arbitration estimates. Some of them pretty interesting. Like you look at like Patrick Wisdom's, projected for a little more. I think, some people expecting maybe that'll be the end of his time here. ALLCITY projected at 2.5. I would be kind of surprised if they picked that up just with his injury history and everything. Justin Steele obviously is in line to get a nice raise, which he'll deserve. $1.9 million for Nick Madrigal. You picking it up?
Son of a bitch. I thought you weren't going to go there, but you
listen, man. Honestly, more than the top of the rotation arm or the offense, if I can just be done with him in this organization, what a win.
We are going to get that moment. We're going to
what
see
a
at some
win.
point Cubs non-tender Nick Magical.
It sounds so
You're
nice.
such a hater. I thought you were a
Brendan.
big Nick Magical fan, Corey. Do you think Ryan Herrera will be sad? I think he will.
I don't care. I love our guy Ryan, but
he's very objective. He can't say that.
Right.
Yeah, forgot about that.
Anyway. All right. We will be here with you on Friday in the early afternoon going forward here. I guess it's technically early morning, late morning. We appreciate your guys' support. Obviously, back on Monday, Luke, Cody, Ryan. And it can't really happen now with the playoffs still going on, but the usual caveat that as the offseason rolls along, CHGO Cubs team will be at the ready for any emergency shows and broadcasts, breaking news, stuff like that. So if anything big goes down and you're looking for a place to listen to and watch discussion, CHGO will have you covered. So we appreciate you guys tuning in. We will talk to you again next week. It's, going to be a long month here of watching other teams play baseball. But then we will get into the nitty gritty of the off season once November rolls around. So appreciate you guys tuning in. We will talk to you again soon. And as always, go Cubs.
We all silly like the mayor.